unfortunately, most people, if you ask them how much money is coming in a month and how much money is leaving a month, they could not tell you. Well, I hate to say this, but if you don't know those two numbers, there's no way for you to know how much money you have left over, how much money you've kept to go send to other assets to bring more money back, right?
I've said this before on Twitter, like if you get your money to do more than one job, it may keep you from having to get more than one job. This idea that we can create more efficiency with the money that's flowing through our life is really important. And it's left out of a lot of typical financial conversations.
When Nate mentions investments and passive income, one thing we've learned the hard way that I can say with certainty is important is how consistently are we creating that and how close to zero in regard to risk are we? And so for me, I now know that I can create certainty and efficiency of our mindful cash flow processes, and I don't have to chase risk in areas that I don't understand or want to understand.
Welcome to the Cashflow Legendz podcast with your hosts Nate, Brandon, and Brock. Remember, our insights are not direct financial advice, so consult with your financial team before making any decisions based on the topics discussed in this show.
All right, so we're here discussing a very simple way to see that your money can be leaked out of your life almost by design if you don't know what's going on. And a lot of people call that Parkinson's law, or call it as your income rises, your expenses follow it. So Brock's going to give us a little quick example of how if you just make one small tweak with how your money flows through your life, you can keep a whole lot more of it. And we're going to do something most people always ask for. We're going to actually show you numbers. So Brock, work your magic.
Thanks, Brandon. I don't think there's a lot of magic to it, but
Actually, there's no magic.
We'll walk through it. So the question here, right, like you just said, is, how do we curb lifestyle creep? Because the two biggest expenses we'll have in our life are lifestyle creep and taxes. And if we can learn how to curb lifestyle creep, we'll be far much better off. But when we go into typical financial planning, there's really only two solutions on how to get bigger numbers, right? Increase your risk and get a higher rate of return, or simply budget. But we're going to add a third to where we implement the right cash flow structure for you, allowing you to have more control of your dollars and actually take your budget off of a spreadsheet and bring it into real life.
Hey, Brock, I'm going to add something real quick. Lifestyle creep, it makes sense. But just in case somebody's never heard that term before, it means if you go from making $75,000 to $100,000 because you get a raise, you start finding new things to buy or pay for monthly that eat up that new raise.
That's right. All right. So you guys able to see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through what, a 35-year-old to 65 would be. Okay. And the math behind that. So what we're walking through here, and I'll ask you guys for some help with this, but let's say that you guys are meeting with, or somebody watching this is a 35-year-old and they are making, let's call it $100,000 a year. Okay. So from age 35 to 65, they're earning $100,000. Now, the reality is most people are going to get raises throughout the year. I don't know where the government gets this stat, but it says that on average, most people's incomes rise at 6.1 or somewhere between 6.1 and 6.9% a year. I don't know if that's true, but I do recognize that a lot of people's income averages about a growth of 4% throughout time. So what that means is this year, if you're making 100 grand, next year you'll make 104, the next year 108, and then so on. Okay. You guys with me on that?
Yep.
Awesome. All right. So what that means is if we were to look at that over the course of the next 30 years, from 35 to 65, you will have about $5.6 million that flows through your hands. Agreed?
Yep.
Okay. Reality is we're actually going to spend some of that money, aren't we? Okay. So if we're sitting here today, the average national savings average is 4%. Okay. So what that means, if you are making 100,000, that means you're spending 96,000 of that money. But as we just talked about with lifestyle creep, what that means is that same expenses of yours are increasing at 4% every single year. Does that make sense so far?
Yep.
Great. So if we were to look at this, what that means is we have $100,000 coming in our hands and $96,000 leaving our hands in that same year, which means we're saving that 4%, the $4,000, and it growing over time. So if we earned nothing on that money, we just stuck it in the mattress, we would have $224,000 sitting under our mattress. However, we all know that most people don't actually do that. What they do is they put it somewhere to get a rate of return. Now, you could use all kinds of numbers. What I'm going to use is a 6% rate of return every year, no market fluctuation, nothing really happening except for, hey, after taxes, after fees, you will get 6% on that money. Okay. Pretty reasonable. So that takes your number to $530,000. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Awesome. All right. So now we're at the two solutions that, or the three solutions that the financial world has to offer us: increase our risk and get a higher rate of return, or budget, cut expenses today, or our way, figure out how to structure your cash flow in a way that you can lower or keep your lifestyle creep from it growing at the same rate your income does. All right. In this scenario, we're just going to go over the first scenario, which is get a higher rate of return, or work with our system on how to make sure that your lifestyle creep is curbed. Okay. Because what I have found is most people can't budget or cut any more expenses out of their life today, or they just don't want to because they like their lifestyle. Right. So, what we're going to go through here is, let's say that we take the first scenario. Your people work with you, and you are able to take them from 6% a year to 10% a year in earnings. So you've increased their risk. When I press this enter button, what do you guys think this $530,000 is going to go to?
You're almost doubling the percentage. So in your mind, you would think it would almost double. So I don't know, million.
All right, let's check it. You're pretty good. $1.04 million. Okay, so that's increasing your risk, getting a higher rate of return every single year to get $1.04 million. All right. That's one way. So somebody write that number down. Make sure we've got the $1.04 million.
Got it.
Okay. So if we're going to test something, we can only change one variable at a time. But let's say that you guys talk to this 35-year-old making this income, and you get them on our cash flow structure. And rather than increasing their rate of return, you help them understand the importance of the right cash flow structure, eliminating or curbing a lifestyle creep. So rather than right now where our annual increase is at 4%, so next year you'll spend, rather than 96 grand, you'll spend $99,000. What if we went from 4% growth to just 2% growth? Do you think it's going to be possible for you to spend 97 grand rather than 99 grand next year?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So if that's the case, and we're looking at these numbers, I'll give some time. We'll be quiet for a second for somebody to think through how much that might actually affect what's going on, and if it's going to be better than getting a higher rate of return
With more risk.
with more risk. So you people probably have their number in their head. So let's see what this actually does. $3.25 million. Brandon, can you remind me what the number was if we increased our risk to get a higher rate of return?
It was 1,041,000.
Okay. Brandon, would you rather go increase your risk to get a higher rate of return, or would you just like to have a better cash flow structure that helps you be a better saver and not so much of a spender?
I see about 2 million reasons why I'd rather have a better cash flow structure and be a better saver.
Okay. Do you think that being uncomfortable for a month or two because you're changing your paradigm shift is worth an extra $2 million?
If I don't think that, we are not an ideal fit.
Okay. All right. So that just means if we can do that and we become a better investor and we get that higher rate of return, we get $5.4 million. Does anybody remember the amount of money that was going to flow through our hands when we didn't have any expenses?
5.6.
5.6. That's pretty close, isn't it?
Yep.
All right. So that's a good scenario. That's all great. That's how it works. But what if, because some people might say, well, Brock, I don't have 30 years to do this. I don't have 30 years to, get back ahead. All right. So what if we were looking at I don't know, I was looking at somebody the other day that's 48 years old. So you only have 17 years. So going back to the first beginning scenario so we can understand what's going on, you're making $100,000 for the next 17 years, growing at 4% every single year, right? For the next 17 years. You're earning 6% on the difference between your money, right? So your annual increase here on your expenses is also 4%, right? So that's $157,000. If we were to increase our risk from the 6% to the 10% we talked about, our number goes to $227,000. Somebody remember that for me, please. So if we did the same thing and we were able to curb our lifestyle creep and go from 4% increase to 2% increase again, it takes us to how much?
659.
Okay. So if we can understand that the new money going into our financial world can bring a massive impact, is there any reason why we should not focus first on our cash flow structure and getting that down correctly?
Nope.
All right. Good deal. I would agree. So that's when we think about cash flow, new money going into our model, and how we operate our cash flow. It's important for us to always remember savings, your structure comes first.
Welcome back to Cashflow Legendz. I am joined here by our awesome co-host Nate and Brock, and we are excited to do something that we talk about daily, which is how do you begin to learn how to make your money work for you, reducing the risk to as close to zero as possible, and creating more peace of mind. And so, Nate, you say often, what's the rate of return on quality peace of mind? Well, it's really incalculable, because if you don't have peace of mind, you know how important it is once you get it again, if you get it again. And if you have peace of mind, you don't pay as much attention to it if you haven't experienced pain, which created lack of peace of mind. So there's always this ebb and flow in our life where things are going according to plan, and we think they always will until they aren't. And then we go, well, my plan doesn't work as good as I thought it could. So first and foremost, we want to tell everybody thank you for listening, watching. Gotten a lot of great messages in the last week just from people uh, appreciating our transparency and how we don't have it all figured out, and we're just kind of sharing our journey, and that's always very encouraging. So guys, you're doing a great job, so keep it up. If you really think about, guys, understanding that your money can work for you, and we start at a very basic level of what does that mean at a kindergarten level. If I would have heard that 10 years ago, my brain would have immediately gone to traditional financial planning of I put my money with an advisor and it goes into the market and it works for me. Is that what we're talking about when we say money working for you instead of you working for it?
It certainly could be. That is one way that it could work. Is that going to get you all that you want and more? Probably not, but it is a start.
And you just alluded to where I wanted to go. Being willing to ask ourselves tough questions or have those tough questions asked us to really help us get clarity on why we think the way we do. Because if you are willing to have those questions asked, you can really go on an exploration to go, why do I really believe this? And so, Nate, when you hear make your money work for you instead of working for your money, what would that have meant to you 10 years ago? And at a very high basic level, what does that mean to you today?
Well, 10 years ago, it would have meant give it over to somebody else and hope it's going to be something one day. That would be my money working for me. Today, it really centers around this idea of getting your dollar to do more than one job. I've said this before on Twitter, like if you get your money to do more than one job, it may keep you from having to get more than one job. This idea that we can create more efficiency with the money that's flowing through our life is really important. And it's left out of a lot of typical financial conversations.
We were just having a conversation before we hit record about understanding what's really going on with how money flows through our life. And Brock, you were doing a little presentation, if you will, really being aware that we need to understand a few terms. We make money, we spend money, but how much of that money do we keep? And what do you mean, or what do we mean when we say that? Because this ties perfectly into money working for you, or we only work for money. So at a very high level, I think that's probably foundational of knowing what's really going on. So why don't you just touch on that first, Brock, and how the world's convinced us that we can only be a consumer?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we want to talk about is the fact there's really only three movements of money in our world. There is money coming in, which we call inflows. There's money leaving our world and not coming back, called outflows. And then there's the difference between those two, which are called capital flows, right? That's where we take money and send it to places that are going to create wealth for us. And when they return money, that goes back to inflows, right? And so unfortunately, most people, if you ask them how much money is coming in a month and how much money is leaving a month, they could not tell you. Well, I hate to say this, but if you don't know those two numbers, there's no way for you to know how much money you have left over, how much money you've kept to go send to other assets to bring more money back, right? And if we don't have control over those three, or mainly those two, we'll always be caught up in what's called lifestyle creep, where our expenses rise to meet our income as it continues to grow throughout time.
That lifestyle creep, something that Nate and I have learned a ton, and from your dad, Brock, and Garrett, and you, is we first have to know what's going on before we know what we want to do about it. And so I was having a conversation yesterday with a former player of mine who I love dearly. So I push a little harder on them because I've already coached them. You know what I mean? I won't let them just waller in what they think they know. I'll like really make them uncomfortable because I have a relationship with them. And I said, how are you feeling about your money helping you live on purpose? And he's like, what do you mean, coach? I said, are you ready to get uncomfortable? And he said, yeah, fire away. I said, do you know for sure that the plan that you have, which was a 401k, nothing wrong with that, some investments and some savings, is going to get you to where you want to go? And it became pretty clear very quickly that he hasn't gone through a thought exercise yet to even get clarity on knowing where he wants to go for sure. He's just doing what everybody told him to do and hoping it works out. But here's the thing, I can have a ton of respect and empathy and understanding with that, because that's the same thing I did for 15 years. I just did everything everybody told me to do, but I couldn't tell you why I was doing that. But if I would have been asked this question, Brock or Nate, what do you want to be able to say when you're 35, 45, 55, 65, 75 about how money has provided the type of life that you want to live? Well, now I'm separating the emotional piece of money and I'm going, this is a tool. Is it doing what I want it to do for me, or is it doing what somebody else wants it to do for them first? So, Brock, you just alluded to perfectly this thing your dad says all the time. The love of money is the root of all evil. But if you don't learn how to love on your money now, it will not love on you later. And you will go have to get more jobs to trade more time for more money. So, why is it so important to start there, guys, before we even talk about investments or rates of return or all the things we hear out in the world today? Why is it so important to start with those mindset shifts?
Well, lifestyle creep is called creep for a reason. It's not called lifestyle sprint. It's because it's very, very subtle, almost to the point where you don't even recognize it. And then you look up one day and go, what have I done? That's the value of mindful cash management, as Garrett likes to call it, is knowing, as Brock said, your inflows, your outflows, and what you're capable of creating through capital flows. When we deposit money in our checking account, we are psychologically giving ourselves permission to spend that money. So that's the value of being better stewards and being more conscious of what's coming in and what needs to be allocated to create the things that we want to create in the future.
You are getting me fired up. Okay. When we get to conversate with people almost daily about these thoughts, I've heard some form of this statement over and over and over again. And I'm going to make a clear point here. It has very little to do about earned income. And the statement is, we make good money and I don't know where it all goes. And what Nate just alluded to is that is by design. The system that we live in is designed to make us a spender first and a consumer first, which means lifestyle creep is built into the plan. And it's so subtle that if we're not taking actionable, measurable steps in conscious decision making on how our money flows through our life, we'll live for 30 years and go, I only kept 2, 4, 6% of all the money I ever earned over my working life. Brock, I feel like I just threw a soft toss to you. Come on. What are you thinking there, nodding your head?
I just think it's funny, that when we think about people's financial life, you just kind of ask them these logical questions of, what do you know how much money's coming in? Some will give you a guess, but they don't actually know. But do you know how much going out? People will very easily say, actually, I have no idea. And then it's like, okay, well, do you want to retire one day? They're like, oh yeah, I think I want to retire at age 65. I'm going to be financially free at 55. I'm like, okay, great. How are you going to do that if you don't even know your numbers? When has it ever worked out in your financial life or life in general that you've turned a blind eye to something and just hoped that it worked out? Maybe once by pure luck, right? You have to, if you're going to have finances in your life and you're going to have a goal of retiring one day or being financially free, you might as well be diligent with what you have and actually pay attention to what's going on. Because if you don't, you're going to get to where you hoped you were going and realize, oh, there's only two things I can do: cut my lifestyle and quit spending money, or keep working because I wasn't diligent enough and intentional enough with my finances all these years before when I had the time to actually do the stuff I needed to do.
I think the accumulation model for most people, not everybody, but for most people, the net worth number that they are working towards is equivalent to a mythological creature. It's something someone told them about, but they've never seen it for themselves and they don't know if they're going to see it. When we focus on mindful cash management, that's actually something tangible that we can actually see. We can see where value is being brought back over to our side of the table. We can see where we can actually curb expenses in some cases, where we can unconsciously save more money in some cases. But accumulating to some net worth number that, somebody ran a financial calculator and said, hey, this is what you need to retire on. I think most people are going to be very upset when they reach retirement age and find out that it didn't work out the way they were told it was going to work out.
Two thoughts there. Pretty fascinating. Brock, I don't know if you know this, but Nate went semi-viral recently on a post he made. Sweet. And I'm going to tell you the thing that was most fascinating to me was reading the comments. And the post that Nate made was about the 401k balance. Okay. And Nate's point in comparison to the comments in the conversation were quite interesting. So I'm just going to keep it at a very high level. High, not like hard to understand, high, like easy to understand. The thing that most people commented on was comparing themselves to others in relation to their 401k balance, i.e., present day number on a screen. There was no awareness of the difference between what saving with no risk and investing with the possibility of loss and risk and the difference. And it took all that I had in me to not humbly say that 500,000, 250,000, 1 million, 2 million, 7 million in your 401k is just a number on a screen, and that is not the amount of money you actually will have that provides value for the life you want to live when you decide to tap into it, if you get there. And it was a clear indicator, 170, 180 comments of how we as a human society, myself included, will follow the herd that's destined to go off a cliff if we don't see the cliff because we're comfortable going with everybody else. Yet, the strongest, most impactful, most value creating people that we know almost always go against the stream. So there has to be this reckoning of what do I think I know that's just not so. Or we get to retirement years, which that's a whole nother podcast. And we go, that $1 million in my 401k never ever equated to $1 million in my hand to live my life. And us three know that. We know without a shadow of a doubt it's going to take about a 30 to 50% haircut, roughly. You're literally going to only have 30 to 50% of that, or
as of as of today.
as of today. Correct. Because there are variables that we don't know moving forward that we can't control. So when we talk about our money working for us, I think it's important for us to dive into the reality that we have to first be mindful of how money's flowing through our life. We have to second be mindful of, do I know those dollars as a tool are going to allow me to live the life that I want to live today, tomorrow, and in the future? And I don't know about you guys, but one of my favorite things to conversate about in our daily conversations with members all over the US or potential members is when they tell me they have this or they have that, then I'll humbly ask them, "Hey, do you mind if I ask you a more delicate question?" And they'll be like, "Sure." Right now, when do you see yourself stopping trading time for money? And almost everybody at an age, almost everybody says, 55, 65, 70. It's interesting. The older they are, the further out that age goes. I'll say that again. The older they are, the further out that age goes. And they, instead of 55 when they were 35, now they're 62 and it's 72. We have to ask ourselves why. It is almost like there's a set of rules of the game going on in the background, and we haven't been introduced to the instructions of those rule books or that game. So go ahead, Nate.
Well, we know the rules of the game for the institutions is money in motion, putting money to work. And we've talked about this before. Money is like a muscle. When it's in motion, it's going to grow, it's going to get stronger, become more reliable. But money sitting stagnant, that's a different situation. It could get weaker. It kind of loses its capabilities. So your money needs to be in motion. It doesn't need to be just sitting still in an account or tied up in assets that don't necessarily contribute to your cash flow. Because the goal is not just to have assets, but to have assets that are going to produce something.
And you're touching on that same question that I was just alluding to. So this young man of mine that's a former player, when I get to visit with him more in depth, I'm going to say, what would you be doing if you didn't have to trade time for money? And is it what you're doing now? And the reality will potentially be, because I've had more conversations with him than just this one. No, coach, I'd actually rather have more of my time back so I can spend more time daily with my kids and my wife. Okay, well, now we're getting into, so you're telling me you would like to protect and lock in your maximum potential of the value you can create, and how do we do that? So is there a downside of learning how to take your ability to create income, becoming mindful of how money flows to your life, and developing a plan that you clearly can measure more consistently, to where now maybe in 5 to 10 years, you are no longer trading time for money because your money has started working for you? And I'm going to add something that Nate said. When Nate mentions investments and passive income, one thing we've learned the hard way that I can say with certainty is important is, how consistently are we creating that, and how close to zero in regard to risk are we? And so for me, I now know that I can create certainty and efficiency of our mindful cash flow processes, and I don't have to chase risk in areas that I don't understand or want to understand. And eventually, as Brock alluded to at the beginning, we have a mindful cash flow process where our dollars become soldiers or tools that go out and efficiently create new flows of soldiers and tools to overtake the income that we are creating with our time, or to replace. Doesn't that sound a lot more fun than, I'm going to hopefully work to 65, and if I live that long, hopefully I can draw down enough to hopefully not to have to limit my current lifestyle, and I can travel to see the grandkids instead of only send postcards? There's a different way of thinking, but we have to lean into how do we do that? But we also have to say, why would I want to do something different? And I think, Brock, a lot of times it comes down to being aware that what we thought to be true isn't. And why is that? And then what am I going to do about it? And so there's this reality of getting uncomfortable for something that's hard, because if it's hard now, it may create peace of mind and ease later. Think about that. It is very easy to systematically send our money somewhere else with a hope and a prayer that it's going to become something in the future. Yet it's very hard to be 65 and swallow a pill because you didn't time the market right, with only that being your plan, to where I got to keep working or go get a second job when I'm supposed to be in the most enjoyable years of my life that I've been working 30 years to get to. I'm not making that up, guys. We see this every single day. We're just the messengers, and we want to give people access to a different way, but we also know it's like anything else. If it's not important to you to change your thinking, then it doesn't matter how important it is to us. Any parting thoughts on those things we've discussed?
I don't think so. I think it's funny because I say I don't think so, and then I'll give you a remark or somebody's. You have any more questions? No, I don't think so. But I
But
do have. Yes, yes, I do have thoughts.
okay,
Parting.
thank you.
And I think that it all boils down to the fact that you got to take ownership of your finances. If you don't, you're leaving it up to chance. Right? You can't complain about it when you get to wherever you're going. You can't complain whether you have enough money or you don't have enough money. It was your fault. It wasn't the financial advisors. It wasn't the markets. It wasn't whatever somebody told you. It's your fault because you didn't take ownership of it. Right? At the end of the day, you're the one who says, "All right, I'm going to put my money there," or "All right, I'm not going to pay attention to this. I'm not going to pay attention to that." So just take the time to take ownership of what's actually going on. And you can't argue with that. Like at the end of the day, if you're not intentional, if you don't take ownership of your own finances, you're leaving it all up to chance. And I hope it works out for you, even though I know that hope is not a good economic strategy.
Darren Hardy said, make it your fault. It's so easy for us to try to blame someone else for our situation. So make it your fault. Take ownership of your situation and do something about it.
Yeah, I heard Myron Golden say yesterday, tied to both those thoughts. He said language matters and words matter. That has been impressed upon us through our mentors we've all had together, or other mentors. And this is the point he made. He said, "You want me to tell you how I know you're broke?" He said, "And I can speak on this because I've been broke. The way I know you're broke is how you talk. So if I see you and say how you're doing today and you tell me, oh, I'm above the dirt, broke. If I see you today and ask how you're doing and you say, well, could be worse, broke." And the list goes on. And it doesn't have to be that way. And I'm going to challenge everybody listening. If you hear the word rich, wealthy, money, billionaire, broke, and it makes you uncomfortable or gets you fired up, lean into why. How can an inanimate object make you feel things? Really think about that. How can it be like a shovel sitting in the corner of my house and me being aggravated at it? The beauty of that is once we become aware of this, like Nate says, we're brought to the forefront of this thing that we now know will haunt us if we don't keep digging, because we'll go, maybe there was something better. Maybe there was something more. So I'll leave us with this. What limiting beliefs do you continue to tell yourself and feed by the way you speak to yourself and others? Because, go ahead, Brock, you're about to say something. Oh, because we have to really start there in the self-awareness and make it our fault. If we're not spending enough time with our kids, why? How can we make it our fault? If we don't have enough time to invest in our church or volunteer our time, why? Make it our fault. Because the other option is the quote I love the most. We'll suffer one of two pains. I think it's Jim Rohn. The pain of discipline or the pain of regret. Said another way, if it's easy now, it's going to be hard later. If it's hard now, it'll create ease later if it's in line with your values. All right, fellas, next week, we're going to talk about how to use your money to build the life that you love. That was a really good segue because that's kind of what we were talking about anyway. Money's a tool. How is it going to help you build the life that you love? If you don't think that's possible, tune in. If you're like, there's no way that's possible, get on our schedule as fast as possible. We're not going to tell you what to do. We're going to ask you why you're doing what you're doing and if you like the results it's getting you. And we're going to help take you on an exploration of if you want to do something different. And it's going to be in your hands. And that's what we love about what we do, is it becomes your action steps. We just become the coaches on the sideline going, hey, you said you want to run that play. Here's how you can run it most effectively from our experiences so far. So we hope you all have a blessed day. We do not take lightly that you share your most valuable resource with us, your time. Hit those like, subscribe, share buttons. We've had a few comments in the comment section in YouTube with some really good thoughts. So we keep throwing around the idea we're going to have a frequently asked question segment. So I feel like we probably need to do that pretty soon. Until next time.